All right, we are back here on the podcast. NFL draft in the books. Very eventful one for the New York teams, especially the Giants, who get a top prospect at the top, might get the quarterback of the future on the board here. Join me today to break it all down. Covers the Giants for the Star Ledger. Darryl Slater is here with us. Darryl, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on here. And I got to say, I feel like a lot of teams did well in the draft. I feel like the Giants in particular, given what their needs were and some of the value they got in the draft, they did a very good job out in Green Bay this week.
Yep, I think, for sure, this will be the Jackson Dart draft. And I think that no matter how good Abdul Carter is, it's going to be remembered as the Jackson Dart draft. The bottom line is, look, the Giants drafted Saquon Barkley second overall in 2018. You could argue whether he should have gone that high, but he's become an awesome player. Didn't matter. Never won with them because they didn't pick the right quarterback in 2019. Not that they probably weren't able to get the right quarterback that year. But the point remains, I agree with what you're saying. I'm not just trying to knock their draft. Carter, great pick at 3. Obvious pick. No-brainer pick. Over Shedeur Sanders, of course. And I think he'll be a really good player. How much of a difference will it make in the long term? Again, it gets back to the quarterback. But in the short term, he will have a significant impact because it's a position where you can make a significant impact immediately. This team probably, we're clearly going to try to win with defense this year. I think overall, good draft. I like the Cam Scadaboo pick. You can't rely necessarily on one back anymore, especially with Tyrone Tracy, good, solid player, but we'll see what he is over the long term. And they needed interior D-line help, Darius Alexander. So that's a solid pick there.
Yeah, for sure. I want to start with Abdul Carter here, and obviously, on paper, it may not look like the Giants really needed him because as they trade for Brian Burns, they have Kayvon Thibodeau, but I think the Giants is a franchise in a place where they can't thumb their nose at elite talent that's available to them, and instead of forcing a quarterback pick at 3 or going back, they got an elite edge rushing prospect. I think, we Giants fans know, the history of this franchise, they win when they have elite pass rush here, and adding Carter there seems like a no-brainer.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and I understand what some people are saying about the redundancy position, but the bottom line is is Thibodeau a star? He's not. The gray area is that he's been pretty good. It's not like he's been an obvious bust. So a bit of redundancy there. They did pick up his 5th-year option. He's going to have to battle for playing time. And so they didn't have to reach there for a quarterback, and they didn't. It's not a great year to be desperate for a quarterback, and they were desperate for a quarterback. I think that for what they had to do it. Like you said, they can't be picky at this point in their rebuild about, if a guy's there for him. Imagine if they had taken Shedeur Sanders, considering all the stuff that we kind of knew, but then really became apparent about how he comported himself in the pre-draft process, including with the Giants, obviously. Yeah. So that was disqualifying for him, clearly for them. But what the rest of the league would have thought if Shedeur Sanders, so it didn't work out that way. And I think we'll see. Maybe Shedeur Sanders will wind up being a really good player. And so that's the great part about it is this will all bear itself out in reality eventually.
Yeah, for sure. I get to the Jackson Dart thing here too. And it was there were rumors online like Joe Shane's son leaked the video that the Giants were all in on Dart, and a lot of teams knew they needed a quarterback. So you may disagree whether or not Dart's the guy, but the process they used to make that pick where they trade back into the first round, make sure they get the 5th-year option if Dart's the guy. They didn't give up more than a 2 third-round picks essentially when we saw Atlanta pick later give up a first rounder next year to go up for a pass rusher. I think good process from Joe Shane there to get their guy. Whether or not you agree if they should have taken a quarterback in this year's group, wait till next year, but they like the guy. This is probably the best way to do it.
I don't think they could have waited till next year. They had to go get somebody. They had to get somebody, and the bottom line is they were going to have to go up and get somebody. Okay, right? So so that's all understood, and can't fault them for picking a quarterback. Can't fault them for moving up, considering where they were and who was ahead of them. Saints, Browns, the whole deal. Did they pick the right guy? Did they pick the right guy this year or last year? Okay, so let's just set aside they had to do this. They passed last year on Michael Penix, Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy. They passed this year on, not in this order, Shedeur Sanders, Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe. Obviously other quarterbacks. But you're talking about the guys who went reasonably with semi-premium picks. Maybe not so much Sanders, but a high-profile player, obviously, who they did a lot of homework on. Jackson Dart's going to be compared to all those guys. The guys last year, the guys this year, because those are the players that Joe Shane said no thanks to last year and no thanks to this year. And we'll see. Look, I just like you reach for Quinn Ewers there. You know, I mean, like, it's a reasonable pick based on what we know right now. But that's, you know, it's completely fair to look back. And that's the same thing you said people could say about Knicks last year. Oh, well, of course they weren't going to take Knicks. He's not a good prospect. He would have been a reach at 6. Well, Knicks ended up having a really good year. Part of that is, you know, perhaps because his coaching with Sean Payton. But remember, the Giants have a guy, Brian Daboll, who's supposed to be like Sean Payton in terms of the quarterback whispering aspect, at least. So, we'll see how it pans out. Seems like a fearless kid. He doesn't seem like it. I had a big story on him for today. A lot of people talking about his fearlessness. That he's going to need that. He's going to need to slide, of course. He's not afraid of making the big time throws, but how will he go about all the processing part of the NFL, all the more complex stuff that he perhaps had to do at Ole, not even perhaps, than he had to do at Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think one thing that benefits him is that, like, while he is raw, he does have the traits that Daboll likes in a quarterback. He has mobility, he has the big arms, sort of like the lighter version of the Josh Allen traits that made him such a good fit in Buffalo. And they did bring in Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, so Jackson Dart does not have to play day one if he's not ready. They can let him learn on the bench behind two veterans, which I think is good for him.
Yeah, big, broad dude, 6'2", so not super tall, but I think 223, so he's got the size to be durable. And it's okay. So it's one thing to say, like, okay, you want a guy to get out of bounds, you want him to slide. Totally fair. But, a quarterback's going to have to stand in and make throws in the pocket as he's getting hit. The best guys do that. That's not recklessness per se, as much as some of the running stuff that he's done. And he's got the kind of physique to be able to withstand some of that, and certainly the mentality to be able to deliver in those spots. But sorry, I forgot where the end part of your question was there.
Yeah, it was a little bit just about, sort of like the idea that he is not to play right away because they have to.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, long weekend.
Yeah.
Correct. So here's where I fall on that. I mean, and it's not like a going on a limb here. The Giants are trying to have it two ways to be able to save. They want to win. The coach and the GM want to win, but if they win, they save their jobs, right? Even if they don't win, they can pull the plug on Russell Wilson, say, after 6, 7, 8 games and they're sputtering, and they go to Jackson Dart. Maybe they continue to struggle to some degree, but he shows promise. That's how else they could save their jobs.
Yeah.
All right. And so that's where it is right now. Like Russell Wilson, not their future. Short-ish leash. I mean, they're going to go into the season with him. I like the approach of not putting the pressure on Jackson Dart to start immediately. That was never going to work. I mean, I'm not necessarily sold on, and they could only go with the free agent options that were out there and the guys who wanted to come play for him. Aaron Rodgers clearly did not. So I'm not sold on Russell Wilson. Who is? I mean, come on, at this point in his career. So pretty decent deep ball numbers last year. Can they protect him? That'll be the big question.
Yeah, for sure. I know the Rodgers thing isn't brought up by a bunch of people here, but like, I'd rather do what the Giants did and have something in here than be Pittsburgh sort of twisting in the wind, waiting on Rodgers' like whims and like basically punting a quarterback spot in the hopes that he'll play for you. I think they handle this much better than Pittsburgh is doing. Yeah,
and I think too, they were going to commit money past this year, obviously, to Matthew Stafford, but I can understand that, sort of. But with Rodgers, it was going to be a 2-year commitment. With Russell Wilson, it's a 1-year commitment. You can be done with him. You forget Jameis Winston, but you could be done with Russell Wilson after 1 year. It's a 1-year contract. Winston essentially has a 1-year contract. But with Rodgers, it was not going to be that. You were going to be committing more resources to him. So unless you really thought that he was going to be, he still really truly has it. And he did show signs last year that he does. That's the murky thing with him. But now they have an escape hatch, whether the GM and coach are here or not in 2026. If Russell Wilson is terrible, regardless of how much Jackson Dart starts or whatever plays, they can just put him curbside,
Yeah.
And if perhaps they could have done that, I guess, with Aaron Rodgers, but perhaps the way they were going to structure the contract, it would have been dead money, whatever, in the next year, and it would have impacted them and perhaps impacted the new regime. So anyway, yeah, I think reasonable approach. I guess suppose at quarterback. It's just a matter of did they pick? Bottom line, this whole offseason just comes down to did they pick the right quarterback in the future? People can wring their hands all they want about Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston. Is Jackson Dart a better option for them than those 6 guys I mentioned earlier? The 3 last year, the 3 this year.
Yeah, that's true here. I do also want to give Shane credit here because at least based on perceived value going in the draft, he did a lot of good work in the middle round, day 2, early day 3, with Darius Alexander who could come in, play right next to Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line. Getting Scatterbo to add to the backfield with Tyrone Tracy and Singletary, I think is a good value pick. And getting a guy in the 5th round in Marcus Embo, who a lot of mocks had earlier in the drafts, a guy who potentially supplant Greg Van Roten at right guard. I think they did a very good job filling some needs on day 2 and 3.
Yeah, the M is actually silent, so it's Bo.
Yeah.
So the one thing about you look at the draft and the best GMs do great in the middle rounds. Right, Russell Wilson, amazing all-time middle round pick. I'm talking 2 through say 5. Okay, 6, 7 total crapshoot. But the best GMs do really good, consistent work, or reasonably consistent in the middle rounds. The Giants for years, basically since you're talking Landon Collins, Sterling Shepard, and again those are upper middle round guys. They have been terrible in the middle rounds. Now, I'll get to, obviously not last year, but Joe Shane initially really bad in the middle rounds. Last year, there's been some success stories. Darryl Slater, right? Last year, Drew Phillips, Tyrone Tracy, nice job in the middle rounds there. In addition to obviously Malik Neighbors, but that's a no-brainer pick.
Yeah.
Okay, so most GMs can do that, can make that pick. I could have picked Abdul Carter. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So, the need at D tackle with Alexander. Raheem Nunez-Rocha is not the long-term answer, so they needed help there. The Scatterbo pick, I like it. You got 2 cost-controlled rookie contract running backs in there, and just let them fight it out and see who's the guy. Because Devin Singletary is not, and they already pretty much moved on from him last year. So, we'll see. We'll see, but I think he's got a chance to go back-to-back years here with good middle rounds, and that's what he needs to do to continue to flesh out this roster and win and keep his job, and most importantly for Giants fans, win.
Yeah, definitely has to win here. I think good job overall for the Giants here. Good touch on the Jets briefly here because in the years past they were more active, more flashy. I think overall with the Jet draft thing, I know it's sort of with their offseason here. This is not. They went for the substance over the sizzle this year. They went more we want to fill holes, get foundational guys. I feel like it's a more baseline approach than we're gonna take the big wild swings to try and win right now. I think. Knowing it's a new regime, it makes sense that they sort of went substance and just sort of gave you steak and potatoes picks.
Yes, for sure. That is Aaron Glenn's approach, and Aaron Glenn's running the team. The GM is essentially a puppet, so it's Aaron Glenn's team, just like it was Bill Parcells' team at all. It's a lot of those places where he worked. He's a Parcells guy. He's trying to do it in that style, and I guess maybe that's his personality too. But there's a lot of Parcells-ish stuff here. In terms of, he doesn't have the quips like Parcells had in the media, but how will that? I mean, the bottom line, how will it work out? Who cares about the guy's demeanor as long as they win? Okay, so how will this team building approach work out? They've moved on from the diva quarterback in Rodgers. They are going with a guy in Justin Fields who's going to run, who's not going to say anything in the media. Who's, I don't know if that's just his personality or if they've completely lobotomized him, but gosh. If he was any more wooden in his initial press conference, you could steer a canoe with him. I mean, so I'm not trying to be mean, just making a joke, and that's fine because his job is not because Jets fans do not care about talking anymore. They don't care. They don't Aaron Rodgers. I can't speak for Jets fans per se, but if you tell them oh listen, Rodgers is going to go say a bunch of funny stuff on Pat McAfee and your team's going to stink, or he's just going to never say anything and your team's going to be good. What would you rather have? I mean, so the Jets coaching hires are up this pendulum, right? Because you just started Rex Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Brash guy, right? They hire Todd Bowles, more quote unquote professional, buttoned up. And then, okay, but then it's like, oh, well, Todd Bowles not a defensive guy. Oh, Adam Gase, he'll fix everything offensively. Or Bowles not an offensive guy, I mean. Okay, well, Gase kind of a, weirdo, not a great leader. What do we need? A leader. Rah-rah. Robert Saleh. They bring in Robert Saleh. Okay, well, Robert Saleh, maybe a little too Rexy, talks too much, whatever. Not an offensive guy, whatever. So now they bring in Glenn. Just lower the temperature. It's the Jet pendulum. The time is a flat circle nature of the Jet coaching hire thing. So not to say the Giants have been super functional in their coaching hires, but that's Glenn's personality. As you said, that's how he's going to build a team. Nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes, physical, run the ball. The Membu pick in the first round reflects that. They got 2 young tackles now. None of this classic Jet thing of bringing. They could fill out a Mount Rushmore of Hall of Famers who played for the Jets late in their career. And we talked about this among people who've covered the Jets over the years. Tyron Smith joins the likes of Ed Reed and when these guys are up for the Hall of Fame, and there are others obviously. You say a former Jet, Ed Reed, and that's what Tyron Smith is. They tried to bring in Rodgers' pals. They tried to go all in. They tried to get older guys. And look, I understand impatience from the owner, but let's be honest, Woody Johnson is not a good owner. He's not. He needs to get out of the way and let these people, and in this case, this person, Aaron Glenn, run the show. And will he do that? We'll see. Seems like he's doing it so far.
Yeah, so far it seems like that way. We'll see what happens to him. I agree. I full agree with you on Woody, by the way. But in terms of the top 2 picks I really want to focus on at the Jets here, I think obviously there was a lot of buzz in the pre-draft cycle. The Jets are going to grab one of the 2 big tight ends, either Warren or Colston Loveland, went to the Bears.
Yep.
I think the process here was sound because I think they needed a right tackle badly. They have a chance now to have if Membu develops top 5 line in the league with all guys who are under 27, which is a really big deal for the Jets, and to circle back in round 2 and get a not as good prospect, but a guy with a Hall of Fame pedigree and Jason Taylor's son Mason from LSU. I think the process was sound where they filled 2 holes as opposed to going with the flashier player first at tight end and having to get a lesser option at tackle in the second round. I like that process better.
Yeah, and then you'd be left kind of scrambling a little bit of tackle. I get it. I like it. It's fine. No issue there. Look, last year they passed on Brock Bowers, right? I think,
yep.
right?
Yep.
For Olufashanu. Is that an oops pick? I don't know. Let's give Olufashanu a little more time. Look, Brock Bowers, really darn good player. But so that's one you might look back and say, oh, geez. But they're asking a lot out of Garrett Wilson to carry this offense. You said it. They did not go with the flashy tight end, the pass catcher. They're going to want to run the ball. Breece Hall, presuming they don't trade him, and Braylon Allen, they're going to be physical. They're going to have the quarterback run the ball in Fields. And so, obviously, Wilson will be a big part of their offense. But they're going to, Mason Taylor will have to contribute significantly. If they had gotten Warren, that would have given them another air attack type guy, or Loveland. They didn't go that route. They want to be physical. They want to run the ball. We'll see. I think no matter how you slice it with their approach, they're not a playoff team, neither are the Giants. But at this point, if you're Aaron Glenn, it's not like he has a playoff mandate. So he's trying to build it the quote unquote right way as the Jets rebuild yet again.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you brought up there with the idea. I think I'm agreeing with you that neither one of these teams looks like a playoff team going into the season here. Whereas the Jets sort of looked at this year, and then you can tell they barely bother with the quarterback class. They say, okay, we're going to get our up flyer guy. Best case scenario, Fields has the Darnold, Baker, Geno bounce back somewhere else, and he finds the post hype success, and we're a playoff team that way. But if he's not good, we build the team up, and we're in better position. We take the quarterback next year. Whereas the Giants are towards the end of this regime's rope here and say we need to get an answer now. So I think this is seeing the contrast of these 2 teams,
which is part of the problem of not firing the Shane Dable regime. They had to make a pick for something they had to do instead of taking a completely objective look at the situation. Maybe Jackson Dart winds up being great. Maybe this all works out. Hey, shoot! Pittsburgh could have had him at 21. And Giants didn't really start talking trade until after that pick, which was a lot of a roll of the dice. But I guess if the Steelers truly think Aaron Rodgers is their guy, but Yeah, how do you balance it in terms of, like, everyone looks at it now as not a good quarterback class, smart to pass on the quarterback. We'll see. I mean, what were people saying about Mahomes when he was coming out? It wasn't like everyone was all in on him, and a lot of teams passed on him, including the Jets and Giants. And so I think, right? So yeah. So I think
Jets
that
did.
The Jets next year, yeah. I believe the Giants did. The Jets next year, could be looking at Garrett Nussmeier, right? Because it's only a 1-year commitment they made to Fields. And that's where I like it. Like, if you're going to the veteran quarterback who's not that good, make him a 1-year commitment and that's it. There was going to be a significant risk even in making the monetary and draft pick commitment to Matthew Stafford, because how would he make the transition to this environment, playing outside, whatever? How much does he have left? There's all those questions at his age. Can they protect him? So they have these disposable veteran quarterbacks now, which gives them flexibility, which is important.
Yeah, that's true here. And last thing here, obviously, like, the big story of the weekend, not even like the top pick or some of the other names move, whether it was the ridiculous Travis Hunter trade, which is probably one of the craziest things I've ever seen here. The Shedeur Sanders slide here. And I know we've heard leaks about maybe he wasn't as invested in the meetings with the teams. We heard like scuttlebutt from Todd McShay about how, like, he wasn't prepared at the meeting with the Giants, that Dable called him out and he wasn't happy about it here. Like, what do you make of the fall he had in this draft? I thought it was a very fascinating, seeing how this played out with him.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where the NFL draft is in a large part like a free market system, or not, maybe that's not the right comparison, but the market dictates it, right? The market will, and just as the results will bear themselves out on whether this is the right decision for all these teams to pass on him. It was very, very evident what the NFL and the quarterback needy teams thought of Shedeur Sanders, whether that was what they thought of him as a professional and how he comported himself, or whether that was simply, and additionally, what they thought of him as just a player on the field. I did a story last year in November. This was right after the Giants had botched their opportunity to get the number 1 pick. Before that game, if you remember, Shedeur Sanders posted the cleats, and he said, you talk about the jinx of all time, right? He goes, you can't go higher than 1. He said that. He said he wore the cleats. It got posted on social media, and then he had that comment, you can't go higher than 1. So basically, we know where we're going, he said. Basically, he said, he called his shot saying he's going to the Giants at 1. Well, the Giants don't get the first pick, which they would have taken Cam Ward. And, I think one thing to remember is that if Jackson Dart doesn't work out and Cam Ward does, that win over the Colts will be absolutely crippling, just like the Tommy DeVito mania was for their draft opportunities last year at the position. And so, I think the bottom line of the people I talked to for draft analysts was, there are these like personality things and he's got antics or whatever, but like, let's set that aside. Is the guy a good player? Like Matt Miller from ESPN did a ranking going into the draft, does a great job. And this was all like just on field stuff. He stacked the quarterbacks who were drafted from 2020 to 2024 and then put, I think, only Sanders and Ward in it. And it was only the first round quarterbacks in those 5 years. And he asked a bunch of people, like, how would you stack them all and then throw Sanders and Ward in? I think there was like maybe 30 something guys. Ward was like in the 20s, or the low teens or something. Sanders was way down there. So just objectively of him as a prospect, there were concerns. And he definitely didn't help himself by how he handled those interviews. I think that's well documented. And perhaps also by like turning down opportunities to work out at these pre-draft events. But ultimately he goes to a place in Cleveland after all the drama and after the prank call from, the son of Jeff Ulbrich, which is unbelievable. The NFL never fails to disappoint in the soap opera realm. It's like, WWE type stuff. But after all that, he goes to a place where he could start this year. He could absolutely start this year for the Browns. You don't think that Jimmy Haslam is going to be pushing Kevin Stefanski to start this kid when, people aren't showing up and the team is 2-5 with, Joe Flacco, and forget Kenny Pickett or Dylan Gabriel, I guess. You know, they're not. You know, they're not gonna. They can't sell that. They can't sell that to people. So,
yeah,
and ultimately an okay spot for him, more than okay.
Yeah, I think he worked out fine in terms of where he ended up as a Scot. I think you could tell by the way teams looked at it. It's like they clearly did not like what he did on the field enough to consider him as a potential starter, and then like weighing
he wasn't worth the hassle.
And that's exactly it, because it looked like, like whether it's, I don't think a lot of these teams wanted the aspect of, okay, if our quarterback is struggling and he's the backup, we don't want Dion tweeting, like, start my kid, he's going to do better than your guy is. And I don't think they wanted that distraction. And I know the media bring it up over and over again.
Yep, just like with the Jets and Rodgers. Rodgers can still play.
Yeah.
But when at some point you become no longer worth the hassle, even for a guy who has Rodgers' resume, because it's what can you do now? Shedeur Sanders has no resume in the NFL. And teams decided, hey, well, he's not worth the roll of the dice as an on-field player because potential. I presume they decided this because of all the things you just said.
Yeah, and I do think you're right on about Jimmy Haslam being involved in the Sanders thing, though, especially considering that the Browns took a different quarterback 2 rounds earlier. Where it felt like Gabriel was the guy they liked and Sanders the owner wanted at some point. That's why the Browns trampled him 2 rounds later to get him.
Slipping Jimmy Haslam, yep.
Definitely be a lot of fun this season, Darryl. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. People want to follow you on social media and hear your coverage of the Giants. How can they do that?
Yep, that's just Darryl Slater on Twitter, DarrylSlater, or whatever they call that app now, and NJ.com/Giants for Giants coverage, and Andy Vasquez does a great job covering the Jets for us. That's NJ.com/Jets. Appreciate everyone reading, and thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for all the time, and looking forward to following your coverage going forward. It'll be a very interesting season, especially with the Giants, and knowing there's a lot of pressure involved there.
No doubt.